Let me turn it on.
Okay.
You're good.
Am I okay?
Yep.
Okay.
I think it was just a little too high, but
Okay.
it should be fine, yeah.
Okay, good deal. And for Zoom purposes, do I need to stand any particular place for Zoom?
No, I think you're good.
Yeah.
The camera is
Okay.
on you.
The camera's on your over there, so you should be
Right.
good. Yeah.
Also, one of those fancy owls?
Yeah.
It follows me everywhere I go.
Yeah.
Freaking me out. How are you all? I'm so glad to be here, and really shout outs, to Deborah. I've had a great time, connecting with you all, your lovely faculty here. And I love all the connections that we have, across all these research areas. I was talking earlier, about, we were talking about like disciplines and like disciplinary, like home and stuff. I'm an undisciplined person. I don't have a disciplinary home, but I have found that it's been a struggle. So for students who are in the room, find a discipline, it's much, much easier. It's just much easier just to have a disciplinary home. But I've also have found that it was kind of beautiful to just kind of be this floater in these spaces, because I feel like it has just enriched my research so much more. And I'm able to have like all these different kinds of conversations. And I just feel like it has really benefited my research. I'm bad with titles. I'm bad with PowerPoint presentations. I'll start talking and then I'll just be going. We might reach a point of something, but we might not either. Just go with me, right? Because I was also so moved. It's my first time here in Memphis. Beautiful city, beautiful city. But I have been wanting to come to Memphis for a long time. And oh goodness, I can't even remember when this came out. I think around 2018 or 2019. Somebody double check that. We all got phones. So that I Am a Man VR experience that came out. Professor Derek Ham, NC State, did this wonderful experience. And during that time, I was doing this research about thinking about what do Black games look like? What might Black game studies be, and what might it look like, right? And I realized that. Especially like for me, I'm not traditionally housed in the humanities, so looking at like representations in the media, that's kind of like secondary to what I often do. So I often find myself, going in and out. I'm like, well, the representations matter, but also interviewing people about their perspectives about these things is also really significant. I never know what to call the research. I really never know. So I just go with it. I'm like, if you like it, you do. If you don't, you don't. That's okay. But I realized I needed to come to this city, because I was trying to figure out why I hadn't published any of the findings related to the I Am a Man VR experience. And that was because I see myself as a scholar. Sure, I'm a digital studies scholar, that's fine. But I also realize that the physical is very significant too. I see myself in my research, like in the intersection space. I'm like one of the thread and the bridges that really like connect, like the physical and the digital. And I want to see what the hybrid creation space looks like. Like, what is it when the physical meets the digital? And that's why I feel like the I Am a Man VR was really this example, this test case that was going to allow me to really like see that. And so I realized I hadn't published it because I was like, I need to come to Memphis. I need to be in the space that this digital experience took me down. And so hopefully, I know that's not the next slide but that's where I'm going to go now. And I'm so sorry. Let's just get there, because I want to start there. That's like really moving to me. Let's get to that part. And Rami's still here? Will this open up to a, can you open this YouTube video for me? I don't want to mess up the experience.
No, you're fine. You should be able just to click on your link.
I can't, okay. All right, perfect. I can't even move it. I can never like click on that and move it. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
No, that's not the one. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay.
Go back a few slides.
That's right.
That one? Yeah. It should be a link right below. I think this is covering it up. I couldn't move. There we go. Thank you so much. And then, perfect. So what I love about the I Am a Man VR experience, because there were conversations during this time around if VR experiences were going to allow us to finally generate empathy. And we can turn the audio down on that. We'll just have that playing if you don't mind. But there were a lot of conversations of like, VR is so immersive and so interactive, we can finally generate that empathy that we need so people can understand the experiences of the marginalized and the minoritized. And I'm like, hold on, don't go that far, because we've had so many examples, so many kinds of experiences where we had different angles of showcasing violence, and that hasn't really panned out. I remember a few years ago, also something very significant. We have another another angle, I'm thinking there's a new game that uses body cam, like the body cam POV. It's like people are creating games. It's really cringe because all we can just think about is like police footage, like police body cam footage. And there's really, it's going to take a while for us to untangle from that because technically, you know, body cam is, you know, it's cop footage. But what I really, during that time when I was collecting like these stories, a lot of folks were trying to, you know, it's around 2016, 2017, the movement for Black Lives is still, you know, mobilized. But there was like hashtag Black Death everywhere, right? And I was a part of a team, I left that team, but they wanted to utilize VR technology to kind of showcase Black life. And I was like, okay, I'm intrigued, tell me more. And in that space, basically what they were gonna do is just showcase the final moments of somebody's life and what their interaction with the police. Basically a Black boy was gonna get shot. And I had to ask myself, like, okay, now what's your point and purpose with this again? We want to showcase, you know, just how horrifying this is. I'm like, and I said to them, I was like, but we have so many examples of this already, right? I can scroll Twitter and see that. But in that, and I also had to give them like a little history, you know, behind, you know, a lot of like the footage. I'm like, people thought dash cams on police cars were going to do that. It didn't do that. And that was around the time, you know, cops were being equipped with body cams. That hasn't done that. Even, you know, I'm thinking of even the example of Miss Mamie Till, you know, showcasing Emmett Till and showcasing like his body. That didn't transform the tide of people finally seeing Black humanity in the country. Like it just didn't do it, right? And I know here in the city of Memphis, you know, you all have your own examples of, you know, all these kinds of things that just won't. They're just not going to do it, right? So I've relegated myself. I'm like, these experiences are not going to create empathy, but they are raising awareness. They are providing, you know, advocacy. They are giving us the educational component. So that's what I really love about this experience. And what I love about it too is that this experience, you know, gives us archives. You know, we're able to, you know, they've really curated this experience, like to put you in this position of where we, you know, we hear the stories, we hear the narratives, we hear the interviews. So you have this, you know, physical and digital like experience, you know, within this space. And so some of the first scenes, actually that kind of worked out perfectly. So your opening scene, I didn't time that at all. Oh, I didn't time it right. It's not the opening scene. But so the opening scene, it kind of gives you like this tutorial of like, you know, how to play, you know, you're a sanitation worker. And this is also, you know, those of you who know who's here in Memphis, you know, the I Am a Man VR, you know, it takes place in Memphis during the sanitation worker strike. And also another part that's so significant about that is that was when Dr. King came, and it's also where you know, he was killed. So the experience takes you to these multiple places. So I did this morning, and it was so wild and so surreal. Hey, I'm so sorry, you guys.
It's so good to see you. I'm sorry, I missed the first few minutes.
Don't apologize. I don't apologize at all. But what I loved about this experience is that it just it gave me the step-by-step of what was happening. You know, we're on the street, South Main, I believe it was, you know, we're there on the street, the protest is happening there. And then I didn't even need to use Google Maps to tell me how to get to Lorraine Motel because the experience told me and I saw it and I knew it. But it was such a weird, visceral, kind of like emotional experience as I was walking literally just around the corner, you know, to, you know, from where you do like in the game. You know, so we're there and then we walk to Lorraine Motel. I'm gonna fast forward a bit. I'll tell you a little bit about what you're seeing here. So this is the sanitation worker. He's trying to see if he's going to be a part of the movements that's taking place around them. You know, there's a lot of protests are happening. A lot of the sanitation workers, you know, they've already gone on strike, protesting and advocating for better working conditions, better pay, especially compared to their white counterparts who had all these things already. And so, you know, he's reading these things, he's experiencing it. And then let me fast forward, let me go forward here a bit. And then here's, you know, like, you know, the street as it was there, you know, where the I Am a Man mural is, you know, where they were walking and protesting and stuff. And so whenever I looked at this and actually look at the actual archives of the protests, you know, it's really just so amazing at how similar, you know, this Professor Ham, who created it, you know, was able to capture this experience. And so why is this significant? Why am I talking about this, right? For a while in streaming, and let me get back, hopefully this is seamless and I can just get back. It's not going to be seamless. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I can do this. There we go. And then from current slide. So why is this significant? Let me go back a bit. Black streamers do things a little bit differently than other streamers in the space. And that's, what do I mean by that, right? Streaming is just like, you put a headset on, you play a game and you just projecting your broadcast to the world. Sure, that's the technical part of streaming, but then what folks do inside those spaces is completely different. And I've really been moved by what a lot of Black creators are doing and have been doing in that space, but it wasn't always like that. So there were, when streaming, let's go back here. When streaming first happened, from the different platforms, there was Mixer, folks have been utilizing like YouTube. But it was the movement for Black lives that forced and compelled a lot of Black users in the space to say, what am I doing with my platform? Who's my audience? What kind of experience am I curating and who am I curating and creating it for? And this was a moment, I think it was right after Eric Garner had been killed, that folks were like, wait a minute, y'all gotta pay attention to what's going on. And then immediately, some of the pushback was, no, this ain't the space for that. We're just gaming here, bro. What are you doing bringing like all that stuff in there, right? So it was really interesting just to see what the responses were when Black folks activated their profiles and their streams to do Black work, right? And so I wrote about it. And then I noticed that there were these extreme differences in what people were doing in this space. And of course, I know a lot of your work, especially what women were compelled to do and forced to do a lot of times. But I know that there's a segment of Black folks that said, I'm going to make this the Blackest experience that I can. And so these are some of the stories that I've been following. And one of the things, key questions that I asked and, what I found for most of them, a lot of them want to fight racism and toxicity in digital gaming. They want to provide Afrocentric content, entertainment. They want to make people laugh. They want white folks to be comfortable with Black folks or make them uncomfortable, to remind people that all Black folks matter, and also to connect Black folks, But one of the things they also realized was that they weren't going to generate a massive number of followers. They weren't going to have these huge, profiles that have so-called mass appeal, right? And there were some people that were content with that. Other folks weren't content with that. So some folks said, hey, I'm out here because I want to make some money, right? But they realized that the pathways to making money was not going to be the same pathway for them. Because what one of the participants here, said, he was like, Kishonna, I feel like I'm doing all the things right. Because a lot of people feel that streaming follows like a template. If you got some kind of cool catchphrase, you got a cue to set, you got the LED lights in the background, you got purple hair, they think then I should be successful, right? But that's not always the case, right? I remember being in a class and there was a professor that was asking students okay, let's make one of those viral TikToks. And I'm like, it doesn't happen like that. I wish it did, but it doesn't happen like that, right? It's one of those moments too. There are also a few things that happened around this time. I know we had talked a lot about PewDiePie earlier, Ninja earlier. I believe this was 2016. Sonic Fox was named Esports Player of the Year. Now, at the same time, Sports Illustrated put Ninja on the cover and elevated him as the face of esports. Why is that a problem? Well, the gaming community and the esports community had already signified and signaled who they thought the person was that would be best reflective, of their community. But for those of you who don't know Sonic Fox, I think I've got his picture. Yeah, blue hair right here. Sonic Fox. Sonic Fox deviates a bit from what's expected of folks, especially in these sports and gaming spaces. Ninja's a cishet white dude. Sonic Fox couldn't be further from that, right? Sonic Fox is a queer furry who uses they, them pronouns. And so their brand of masculinity is, different than what a Sports Illustrated would think about what Black men should be doing and could be doing, right? And they were like, there's no way. I could imagine, the conversations at that table where they said, ain't no way we're going to let a furry be the face of esports. That's basically what they said. So instead, who did they put up there? Ninja. I don't have no picture. I refuse. I refuse. You can Google Ninja. And so they put Ninja up there. A misogynistic, kind of racist, trash human being. I'll just go ahead and say it. But that also did several things. First, that multiplied his platform even more, right? You know, if people are like, well, he's the go-to, you know, we should look to him. You know, that signals certain things. If a Sports Illustrated magazine said this is the person that you want to look towards. But I also did a lot of different things like in the Twitch universe, in the Twitch space. I don't think I have that slide up here, but a few years ago, Twitch had, they released, it leaked actually, Twitch earnings, the top earners in Twitch, like this was released. And on that list, it was mostly dudes, mostly white dudes. And then so many people were shocked. They were like, wait a minute, how are they making money? How do they don't have that many followers. I got more followers than them. I do more, I have more content. There was some incongruencies there. But I think that was also the moment where people realized this was not an equal landscape and everybody's not created equal here in this space. These platforms were doing things to perpetuate, you know, a lot of racial and gendered inequalities, right? The mere contracts were different. I'm even thinking about King Sanat, C-E-N, Kai, how you say it? Kai Sanat? Yes, he's the one, he is basically King Twitch. Twitch wouldn't be nothing if it wasn't for this black dude, right? He just recently got banned. But I'm even thinking when he reached that high number of subscribers, what did Twitch send him? A pair of Jordans or something. Didn't he send him like a pair of shoes? Not more sponsorships, not more money, not a more fair and equitable contract. He got a pair of shoes. Ew, that was a racism. But a lot of folks talk about, you know, how their contracts, you know, women get paid less, you know, their payouts and their earnings, you know, they're really paid less. So a lot of folks realized that early and they said, well, I might be in this space, but I can divest my energy from trying to monetize and make money, and I can be committed to the communities and the population. So that's really like the focus that I pay a lot of attention to, right? Some of the questions that I asked like in the space, you know, just the research questions, you know, how are Black gamers or users impacted by the dominant narratives deployed in the media? What impact does this have on their gaming practices? How do Black users respond to them? And how do they counter and resist these kinds of things, right? Traditional kinds of questions that most folks would ask. One of the things that I recognize, because like I said, I come from like a social science space. You know, I don't come from a traditional humanities space of like, you know, doing like deep dives and deep readings of like, you know, games as text. You know, it's a beautiful work. But I had to spend some time in those spaces because a lot of these, the things that folks, when they stream, they are paying so much attention to the content of the games. So I had to too, right? In order to, you know, make sense of what they were saying on their streams and how they were connecting to one another in the space, I had to do that as well. I remember some of the earliest streams, they did like a deep dive back. You know, we did this corrective thing where a lot of folks went back and said, hey, it's not that many folks of color, you know, as characters in the games, but let's look at the ones that we do have. So I remember following a stream that looked at Dead Island. Dead Island was the game that I think a lot of us, it was the first time that we played a Black woman, playable character, Black woman, Sister Perna Jackson, and we were very excited to play her. So the zombie genre is really interesting because I don't think they're not scared to diversify, but I feel like it's one of those things where kind of like the zombie genre, like for movies, you need the Black dude to save the day, right? You know, you've got, you know, we're going to be on his backs and he's going to save the day. He's going to die at the end, but he's going to sacrifice himself and we can get away. You know, and these follow like, I feel like a similar, it's not that. I'm totally destroying the zombie genre. Sorry for fans of the zombie genre. It's not my genre. But it was really interesting just to see the zombie genre has always actually been like a place of diversity. We often see from movies, film, cinema, we see diversity there. So when gaming got into like the zombie genre, I was really fascinated by this. So when I played, because I played it first before I saw any marketing material, I played as this woman. And two things that I want to talk about here. Her special ability was coded I guess I could have told the story a bit better, but let me just go ahead and get to the point of the story. Her special ability in the game was coded as feminist whore, meaning somebody typed out the words in the code to call her alt ability, you know, for gamers in here, you know, when you do your special move and your special ability, they called that feminist whore, right? And I think, you know, they got in trouble. They're like, oh, well, maybe we didn't mean to be mean. You know, we were just joking. These are just jokes. And then they called it, they replaced feminist whore with gender wars. I don't know why they thought that was even better, but hey, but to me, I think it was a lot of people were like, why would they do that? I think it's important to place this game in the context in which it existed. I believe it came out in 2013. Feel free to correct me on that, but it was basically like the precursor to Gamergate. And I feel there were a lot of moves in the industry to diversify content, and there was a lot of pushback because people didn't want to do that. So could you imagine being like that game developer who had all these awesome ideas for this character you wanted to create, and they said, no, you got to make a Black woman. Like, I bet he was mad. They fired him and everything, but I bet he was mad. And so I'm sure that's why he was throwing a little tantrum, being a big old baby. And he just said, I'm going to call her feminist whore. Like, I'm like, okay, all right, go ahead and lose your job. But another thing that was very interesting with this, right? Because when they marketed her, she wasn't that beautiful dark-skinned sister that all of us saw inside the game. They lightened her skin. They Europeanized, that's the word, they Europeanized her features, right? And then you have to ask yourself, why do that, right? We know why. But you have to ask yourself, you know, why do y'all do that? The marketing space for a lot of these games really are fascinating and tell us really significant stories about who and what's valued and what's valuable, right? But this wasn't the first time that the gaming industry did this. So I put this example is sitting next to the Lara Croft example, because when I found out the history about Lara Croft was originally Laura Cruz that had a South American origin story, and she was gonna go and reclaim the stolen goods from the British Empire and take them back home to her indigenous communities and populations. That sounds cool AF, right? But then, you know, Rockstar, I believe it was Rockstar, they said, no, we're not doing this. No. You gotta wasp up her origins. Okay, you gotta give her those British origins, because the audience is not going to connect, you know, with that story. And that's not the story we're telling right now. So there's a lot of erasure of a lot of folks of color. You know, people often say, you know, why gaming, especially in a space where anything's possible, you know, why do they continue to give us like the same old kinds of things? Well, a lot of developers and designers want to diversify, want to give us cool stories, want to do that. But then it gets hemmed up like in the marketing, you know, department. So watching Black women talk about like this story and talk about like this game on stream was really interesting. And what I love is that they put some of those old games, you know, it brings them back into the conversation and really puts them into like the canon, if you will, of you know, like Black digital practices. And of course, Lee Everett, I got to talk about Lee Everett everywhere I go, because this was one of the examples that folks gave me as like, you know, this is an amazing game, Kishonna, you're going to love it. Oh, it's a father narrative. You know, it's really powerful kinds of masculinity being talked about here. And then when I turned the game on, the opening scene was a Black man in the back of a police cruiser. I closed that computer so hard. I'm like, I don't know why y'all thought I wanted to see that. Like, come on now. And then my friend was like, no, Kishonna, what are you talking about? No, just skip past that part, Kishonna. That has nothing to do with the rest of the game. But for me, you know, I had to do my little deep dive thing. I'm like, well, if it has nothing to do with the rest of the game, then why are they using this as the anchor point for this story in the game? Then my friend came back and said, oh, Kishonna, here you go. You're a feminist killjoy. He's actually, I don't know why my friend thought this was going to do something different. Lee Everett is actually a professor of history at the University of Georgia. Like, he really said that, like that was gonna move me in some kind of significant way. I was even more mad because I'm like, why didn't we start at the lecture hall on campus with him giving a lecture about like the Civil War or history of Georgia? Why didn't you do that? But instead they did this to authenticate his Blackness in some particular way, right? Streamers had like a field day like with this one. They went back and played the game, because I don't think this was really on a lot of Black folks' like radars, like for games, until there was like a time like during 2016, 2017, where people were going back and playing. So it was, they talked a lot about, how these games are similar to film and cinema. They'll give you like the big 3 or 4 of, Black representations. They'll show Blackness and brownness as like criminals, where, they'll give us drug dealers, Middle Eastern men is like the terrorists all the time, right? Black and brownness is like the help, domestic help, sidekick help, but also like this comic relief, buffoon and coon kind of characters, right? And so it was really interesting just to see the replication of those patterns inside games. Another a big narrative that we often see in media that we don't see that much in games is the slave narrative. Hollywood will greenlight a slave narrative in a heartbeat. They love that one. And I think we haven't had that many examples in the gaming space. There's a few. That's not next. Of course, it's not next, but I'm going to go ahead and go to it. Let's get there. I went too far. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Okay, now you said I can just click on it to open. Beautiful. All right, of course, we got ads. Let me try to make this bigger. I don't know how to make this bigger. Is that it? Is that the bigger, or is it already big for everybody's screen? Down here. Here we go. That's where. Okay. Let me turn the volume up here. It's a cinematic trailer for let me pause this here. Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry. So good. It's so good. I love this so much. There's a lot of racial violence here. A lot of colonial kind of violence, I guess. I don't know how else to say that. Yeah, a lot of violence here.
I was born into slavery. Pride of any right.
Sorry, let me go back so the captions are there. Apologies for that.
I was born into slavery. Deprived of any right. Soul treated for labor. Forced to watch their suffering treated by our nation. With no future ahead, I forged my and I knew God had paid the price. I never looked back, never wanted to, never had to, until now.
Can you all imagine the feelings of elation that we all had? First off, because we were wanting to see more dynamic stories in gaming, right? At this point, okay, we're all playing Grand Theft Auto, Saints, we're all playing those kinds of traditional narratives, right? And I love Grand Theft Auto, so no shade to Grand Theft Auto, right? But I wanted gaming to do something and be something different. Because like I often say, in a space where anything's possible, they gave us the same old narrative. And it seemed like such a waste of the talents of the beautiful people behind those spaces, right? Everybody really tried to, there was a time where everybody was trying to just recreate the specialness of like CJ from San Andreas, which is a dynamic story. It's a dynamic game. But, there were just like, it was perpetuating certain kinds of tropes and certain kinds of like stereotypes, right? And it didn't add much like to the conversation. So I'm like, okay, give us something else. So when this came out, first I was disappointed. I can't just be happy with things, right? I should, but I was disappointed. I was disappointed because this is not the main game in the franchise. This is DLC, downloadable content. Okay, and what does that mean, Kishonna? So that means a lot of times you have to opt in to play it. You have to go find it, you have to locate it, you have to purchase the original game first, I think for the most part, in order to access these extra features, right? Gotta pay for it, you know. So there are all these barriers to access to get this black dude as your hero, right? I'm also writing a bit about this concept as like diversity as DLC, because this is a big trend in gaming a lot of times. For a long time in Fortnite, for a long time in a lot of these games, if you wanted to play as a black person, you had to pay for them, right? You had to pay for access to get to them. Now, what does that say? Is that saying that, you know, these are, you know, these luxurious special entities and beings that not everybody can take advantage of? No, that means you didn't take enough time to build them into the core of the game and the core of the experience, that they were an afterthought, so you had to put them in later. Let's go ahead and be real about what is actually happening in these spaces. You're mad because somebody popped off about you on Twitter. So you're like, oh yeah, we did forget to put, you know, Black Girl Magic in the game. We're doing it now. Look, she cute. Look. And then you want us to be happy with the afterthought, right? But let me get back to Adewale. What I love about this game, and I should have gave some actual in-game content, no one had really ever seen this level of interaction in gaming before. You're basically a black dude destroying the institution of slavery, the literal institution of slavery. And he was there as, it's like the precursor to basically one of the most successful uprisings that we've had in the Western Hemisphere. And, you know, it was basically the precursor to the Haitian Revolution, right? And I love that we had this experience. I wish more people could have experienced this. And going back even to so many people who were streaming, they went back and they were just talking about, and I wrote about this in Intersectional Tech, you know, because in the game, you know, we kind of forget the origins of where a lot of Adewale's furor and, you know, his passion, you know, was derived from. You know, we forget about this moment, like being taken away, like from his mom, right? And I think that a lot of times, like this moment right here, like I spent so much time just talking about this moment of like Black women's rage. Black women's rage really is praxis even, right? About how often Black women spend so much time and, you know, anger and frustration and rage, and so many people want to dismiss that as like an unuseful emotion, you know, but there's like so much beauty and magic and power that happens inside those emotions. And it was really beautiful to see so many Black women talking about that, about how they saw this moment. They said, we know exactly what we know somewhat of what her pain was right here, of our children being taken from us. And there was a stream, Tasty Diamond, I think is her name, you know, when she was streaming, you know, she talked about, it was in the moment of like so much hashtag Black death, right? Of, you know, mothers, you know, their children being shot and taken and snatched from them either through death and assassination, you know, being disappeared inside, you know, the walls of the criminal justice apparatus, you know. And so they really made so many deep connections of like that continuation of the story that a lot, especially for the United States context, that really started there at the plantation, right, in the transatlantic slave trade. And so it was really interesting just how they drew like all these connections to like things that was happening. Some of the games didn't do it. Now, I thought this was beautiful. And a lot of the gameplay, like I think we, you know, we killed everybody in the game. It reminded me of Django. You all remember the movie Django? You know, it's kind of like similar, you know, just a Black dude just destroying, you know, like white bodies. People were mad at this game though. I remember seeing an article. It was funny. The person who wrote it, you know, they were a huge fan. They usually streamed Call of Duty a whole lot, you know, a lot of the military shooters. And then when they got to this game, to play this game, that person wrote an article, a blog that said, are we okay with this level of violence in video games? I'm like, what? Like, what are you saying? I know what they were saying though. They were not okay I should have put some of the gaming content. They were not okay with, let me get to the scene. They were not okay. Here we go. Let's watch this part again. They were not okay with this. Let's just be honest. They weren't okay with this. A Black man with this level of domination and power destroying white masculine bodies. Because this, if we, think back historically, this was the narrative that was fueled and created to basically lead to the decimation of the Black communities, to continue to relegate, Black folks to the ghettos and the silos, and to take away their rights, and to, restrict their movement and restrict their freedom, because this is the thing that will happen if we don't control their bodies, if we don't restrict them, right? And even if we think about, I spent some time looking at, the archives around runaway slaves, because I remember seeing some of the flyers. I was reading a book. I can't remember what the book was, but I noticed there was a change in the narrative of runaway slave flyers that was fascinating to me. Early on, when an enslaved person would, leave the plantation, the narrative wasn't oh, this dangerous brute must be captured at all costs. It was oh, Bubba ran away. We got to get him. If you see him, he's this height. They gave a description. What changed? Nat Turner's rebellion changed that dramatically, night and day. And you can even look through, you can see, those flyers and, those postings and newspaper clippings. And then that moment happened. And then immediately we were talking about the dangerousness of these Black bodies if they got away, if they loitered too long, if they were hanging out too long. We had to break that up, because if they're talking amongst one another, if they're reading and writing, then they're gonna be riding and looting. It's really basically what some of those narratives kind of evolved around. So it was just really, this was just a dynamic thing. I know I hope I'm okay on time, because there's a couple more slides that I want to show, but feel free to stop me anytime. Let me get back here so we can look at this other example. This was one of the games in the list. The other game that was in the list that I want to spend some time talking about, that we gotta spend some time here. You can QR code that. I'll pull it up. You don't have to QR code. I'll open it up. Before I open it up, let me talk a little bit about this one. I don't particularly like military shooters. I'm not invested in the military industrial complex in those ways. But I have to go where the co-narrators and the co-producers of research are, or participants. Some people will call them participants in research. But they're playing these games, so I got to go to where they're playing, right? And, so I can't tell y'all the countless hours I have in Call of Duty Modern Warfare. I'm oh my gosh. Battlefield was an interesting one. Folks were Kishonna, don't discount it immediately. Look what they're doing. They're doing something cool. Let's play this game together, right? I was okay, let's play it together. So I got Battlefield 1, and they sold me. I was well, why didn't y'all tell me that the Harlem Hellfighters were in it? They was see, we knew you'd love it. I didn't know much about the Harlem Hellfighters. I'm not a historian. I don't know much of these stories, but I wanted to do a little bit of background first before I played the game, so I can get a sense of what I might have seen on the screen. So I learned that they were really kind of successful in war terms, whatever you can, you know what I mean? I'm not advocating, I'm not glorifying, the massive death of other people, but, they had success in France. They were this Black and Puerto Rican regiment, they came out of New York, and they were pretty successful. So I was oh, well, let's see how the game treats them, right? I was really fascinated. So let's play it. Let's start the show here. It's a really beautiful, listen, the opening is so beautiful. I'm gonna just be quiet so we can listen at this. Let's go back. Just to give a big, just in case it's kind of difficult to hear, but the song that's playing is Dream a Little Dream of Me in the background. Okay, I'm gonna let that keep playing in the background. What I loved about that opening narrative, whenever, I had read narratives of Black military personnel, they often say that their experiences was dreamlike. So that opening, really sat within like the narratives of how people talk about it. Even when we have, a lot of our, veterans, who talk about their experiences, they often talk about it as like, it seemed like yesterday, but then it seemed like it didn't happen, so that was a really interesting part. But the game gave us like this narrative here too. This was funny. You are not expected to survive, right? For those of us who play shooter games, we know there's like this template. We go, we shoot a little bit, we fight a little bit, we die and we spawn back, right? So most of us like just laughed at this statement and this phrase. I don't think we realized how true it actually was. So when you open up the game, here you are, it's first person, you can't see yourself. We don't know really who we are. We don't know if it's, that beautiful brother that was, in the intro or what, right? So here we are, we're playing and we're shooting and we're battling. What we experienced after this, because we don't, a lot of times the streaming space, I love it. Most of them, play the game for the first time while they're on stream. I know we were talking a lot about performances earlier too. A lot of them don't. They're acting like it's brand new, and you're wondering, like, why are you so good? Because they've played it before. They're lying. They've played the game before. But anyway, in this space, listen, I'm telling you, Black girls are truly like authentic. They're like, no, let's just get in here and let's play it, and then they give you those authentic experiences, for the first time playing it. So it was a really, powerful game. Most of us, we were able to figure out the moves, because it was like a traditional shooter. We had seen this before. So what was happening, we felt like the game actually was trying to kill us. It was hard for us to generate our health back. When we would like pop out, immediate headshots, so for those of you who play the game, if you're getting hit immediately and instantly, it's hard. We couldn't generate our health back really, like no matter what we did. And so we were like, okay, the game wants us to die, but for what purpose? And then we soon found out, right? So here's, when this happened, pause the game. So we were on somebody else's stream, it was a group of us that were all playing, but somebody else was like streaming. So she pauses it and she had like mouth open. She was like that for like a little bit, right? And then we were talking and, some folks were like, oh, this is cute. They're giving you a memoriam, for like a person who was like fallen. And, we get like a sense of like, when they were born and when they died. We'd never seen this in like a game before. We didn't really know what to do with it, right? But it gave us pause. But then, of course, the game just kind of, we got the cinematic move, just to another place on the battlefield. So, and of course, for most people who know shooters, you just get back into the battle. We didn't think much about this at the time but this kept happening, right? This kept happening. So, and then it gave us like another name. So somebody, took it upon themselves to look up like, who's Willie Jefferson? Is this a real person? Is this like a real memoriam? Did they actually go and, talk to the family and find that out? From what we found during that time, and I don't think this is true, I think these are all made up names. There's no real true history with it. These names are all made up, right? So they kind of gave us like a pseudo, honoring like of these folks, but it started to not sit well with us, right? And so here you have the game, just the entire opening is all of this, just engagement with all of these men's, the last moment of their lives. Keep in mind, I think this game came out in like 2016. Hashtag Black Death everywhere, right? And so I had to, I'm always thinking about like, who did you develop and create this experience for? Black folks didn't need more of this, right? This was not created for us. I argue that white folks don't need it either. There are already plenty of examples for them to see the humanity of Black life, right? And you're not going to see humanity in Black life if you're constantly consumed with Black death. There's just no way. Those things are incongruent. It's not going to happen, right? And so when we were sitting with this game, let me get back to the slides here. And so it took us a little bit to really think about what did we think about this game. So we're excited that we have more diversity, right? We're excited to see these stories. But then we have to remember that whenever you bring in Black stories and Black folks into these narratives, they're going to be subject to the overwhelming violence that is gaming, right? when I was playing Call of Duty, I said I was going to come back and talk about Call of Duty. Sydney is her name. Sydney was the first Black woman that I was ever able to play in Call of Duty. Farah is the first Middle Eastern woman who has a hijab. You know, she's the first Middle Eastern woman, beautiful brown woman that I was ever able to play in Call of Duty. I was really excited to be able to play these characters. So I had to pay for her, right? Had to pay for her first off. When I played her, and you know, we're you know, she's in the game, and I'm pretty good. Let me let y'all know I'm pretty good at Call of Duty, okay? Like I ain't no rookie out here now. I'm good at the game. So I'm used to like overwhelming digital video game death, right? Something hit me differently when Sydney got killed. And I saw her body lying there in the game, right? And I know, like in mom, and I'm like, Kishonna, it's just a game. Just go on. It's not that big of a deal. Don't make more of this than it has to be. But my soul would not consolidate my feelings of asking for Black and brown women to be in a game like Call of Duty, with its destruction and decimation of Black and brown bodies globally, with its destruction and decimation of like the global South. You know, I was like, what am I actually asking for? Why would I want us to be a part of this system that is leading basically to the destruction of, you know, my folks, right? So I don't play her anymore. I play a white dude in Call of Duty now because I just cannot. I spent all the money paying for Sydney, but I cannot. Like my spirit and my soul just won't, because I don't like to see her dying over and over and over again. I can't see it. How am I for time? There's a few more things here.
It's almost 4, but we have time if you want to. It's for like 10 minutes. And then
Is it okay? Okay, I just wanted to see what I skipped over here. Oh yeah, I'm terrible at PowerPoints. I'll just throw things in there. Something I get inspired sometimes. I'm really invested in creating this concept around like this Black digital identity development. I was really inspired, you know, seeing how the gaming changes like the landscape of who you are and what you do in a space. In Intersectional Tech, that, you know, the book came out in 2020, but that was like a culmination of like a 10-year ethnography that basically started, you know, from my dissertation work, right? And doing ethnography, you know, of course, you know, I did like I was in there for a few weeks and I published it. You know, that's not ethnography, right? So I wanted to stay true to what ethnography actually was, but and also given like, you know, the structure of, you know, academia, I had to publish something. So most of the stuff that I published were just snapshots of things. They weren't like a whole story that I was able to tell yet, right? And so I'm really glad that I stuck with it, you know, despite all the challenges, you know, despite, you know, folks not seeing the value of gaming and the value of, you know, cultural experiences like in the digital spaces. I'm really glad I stuck with it, because really this long-term story I was able to tell was a really dynamic one. I really hate that I had to flatten it for a page of a book though, right? What do I mean by that? So just the mere act of connecting with people was dynamic. So let's say I'll start talking with somebody through a text message, and then we'll jump to like Facebook Messenger, and then we'll hop onto Skype. Yes, y'all don't even remember Skype. I don't know how is Skype not the winner? How is Zoom the winner of things right now? Where is Skype? Like, where is Job? Where is Skype right now, right? But anyway, you know, we would hop on Skype, we would hop on Adobe Connect, you know, these are all things that were like old school technologies, you know. And then we would play the game. And then we would do all these connections, and then we would go into the gaming space. I think the digital connectivity was a huge part of the story that I wish I could have had like a 3D, 4D model, you know, to really like showcase that. But even there was also even something to current events and, you know, political things that were happening that influenced the dynamic of communities and spaces. There was one example in there where we all remember, it was kind of like a 9/11 moment of where we all remember where we were. Some of the women in the cities, you know, remember where they were when the officers who killed Rekia Boyd were let go. And that was such a huge shift in the gaming space. A lot of the women, especially who were like in Baltimore, they were in Chicago, and they were in New York. These women were some of the early foundation for what we now call, you know, the Say Her Name, you know, campaign. right? When that happened, so many of them went to the streets and they were mad that other people didn't show up like in the ways that they showed up, like for Freddie Gray, and they didn't show up for like Mike Brown. You know, they were like, you know, Black women are getting killed too. So it was really interesting just to see what the conversations were. But in that moment, you know, when they announced, you know, that Rekia Boyd's killers, you know, were getting off, so many of the women said, oh my gosh, you know, I can't believe this happened. And then they shifted from the gaming space, and then they shifted to like the Twitter spaces, to the Twitter messages. And I just feel like I couldn't really capture just the speed in which that happened and just how seamless that was, like the ways that they go in and out of this digital connectivity. And then how they mobilize so quickly. You know, somebody had made a flyer, they shared the flyer, and then they showed up in the streets and they were protesting. Like, it was just so interesting. And a lot of people look at like my work as like, oh, that's just a gaming book. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, I get so frustrated, you know, when people don't understand that these are massive dynamic communities inside these spaces, but we're not just playing games in there. You know, we're organizing, we're protesting, we're crowdsourcing, like we're helping people pay bills in there. And, you know, and I think that and it was just so hard to help people understand just the architecture of these spaces and how there's just been a convergence of the mediums over time and how seamless, you know, we go from the gaming space to social media to the physical space. You know, it's just hard to really like make sense of that. And I feel like that's one of the saddest things that I can't really that I couldn't really capture in intersectional tech. But some of the work that I know I had to take out because I didn't really have it fully thought out. But I remember there were some conversations about how community is developed inside the gaming space, and how these are like spaces of like safety and security and these safe havens and hush harbors or whatever you want to call it, you know, infinity spaces, third places, whatever you want to call it. And then so many people, you know, said, you know, I don't know where I would be if it wasn't for this gaming space. If it wasn't for coming and playing with y'all on Animal Crossing, where would I be? If we didn't do all these things, where would I be? And I think that there's something significant to say, especially for these younger folks who have always had like, you know, gaming in their lives, you know, who've always been like connected, and how this is like really like a core aspect of like their identity. You know, so and also all the other things like around it, you know, seeing Black stories and seeing Black narratives in there, you know, so that's some of the future work that also that I want to work on. I'll stop there. You know, folks always ask about like other examples of stuff. I haven't finished playing Detroit Become Human yet. Is it a good one? I see you clapping. Yeah, I'm guessing it's a very good one. Yes, yes. Oh my gosh, so we got to, I'm done. If we want to just open it up, go ahead and clap for me. Let's start talking. Let's go. What'd you say again?
I learned about it from my niece. I didn't actually know about the game, but then I saw her playing it. My mom was telling me about her playing it because my mom likes to watch her play.
I love it. Oh, I love that. I love, especially that intergenerational gaming. Yeah. You know, like how like it brings like folks together because these are some dynamic stories that are being told in here. You know, and so it's really powerful. I love hearing that. I'm opening it up for questions, other comments, other games, other thoughts, other things that you got inspired or you know about. Go ahead. Yes, everybody.
Assassin's Creed is, I don't want to put too much faith in the company, but they tried to make it more storytelling. They only put one game, like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, 19 years, you saw it. You can play through your original.
Beautiful.
They don't do their DLC stuff.
Yeah.
It's frustrating because I want to be able to use all the things.
Absolutely.
The diversity of opinions.
Yeah, absolutely. Is it because that's like a AAA, like a big company? Like how are the other games in other spaces? Are any of them doing it well to be able to teach?
Like they made it like a version of the games. Like if you have the game, you can this educational model, model for free. Right. And they also make it so that you can actually create conversations. Interesting. Do live and like put time into it. Yeah. So you can make some conversation.
Wow, that's
some of their names. So far, it's just groups. And so they have a lot of different locations for their.
Isn't Egypt in there?
Yeah, they have done that one.
Oh, you know why?
Yeah.
You know why. Yeah. Fascinating. Interesting. Yeah. Other areas that were, yeah.
I wanted to ask on like a recent discussion that I saw about what makes a character a Black character in the game. So like Forspoken, the game has Black female protagonists, and the entire dev team is white Asian.
Yeah.
And so she was created by non-Black people. Her voice actress is a Black woman though.
Mhm.
So there's this debate on, does she count as representation? And I feel like the standard has kind of changed because like that's kind of normal. I think like for Black characters to be made by non-Black people. But what do you think about that? Like, do you think like are these characters that are these Black characters that are made by non-Black people authentically Black characters?
I appreciate you asking that question. You know, so I came up, you know, I'm an 80s kid, you know, I grew up, you know, 90s, consuming a lot of 90s media. And some of my favorite, you know, TV show characters were Black folks that were created by white teams, right? Does that make, all like Quincy Jones is like a part of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air team, but does, you know, the all white team that, you know, was behind Fresh Prince of Bel-Air make that any less of like a Black experience, right? I'm talking tongue in cheek a little bit here. So let me, I just gotta get it out so we can think about what we're actually saying, right? You know, all the, you know, the Cosby Show, you had a lot of Black and brown folks like behind the scenes. There were a lot of white folks that were there. Family Matters, I think it was like an all-white team. I think they kind of went viral a little bit. You know, people were like, that's the whitest Black family we've ever seen in their lives, right? But I think we have like, I think we forget that our media industries are dominated by white creators, you know? We're not in the rooms. So what do we can ask them, hey, give us more diversity. We can ask them, hey, let us be in the room. We'll, you know, we're give us a job, let us in those spaces. That's not happening quick enough. So I guess I think about what the alternative option is, and that's for them to say, fuck all y'all, we ain't gonna create none of it, and we just won't do it, right? I think what we have right now, sorry my language, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Forget I'm in the South too, you know. I'm in the South. I'm not even dressed right. I got flip-flops on. I ain't dressed right. I had to remember, Kishonna, act like you got some home training when you come to the South. That's why I spend a lot of my time thinking about what do Black characters look like when Black folks are creating them, which is why I spend a lot of time, you know, with the I Am a Man VR, Hair Nam, Momo Pixel. You know, I think I look at the dynamic ways that Black folks create, but I also think about the conditions in which they are creating, because they're not at those big AAA studios. You know, a lot of times, you know, making the game is like their third or fourth job, you know. They don't have access to funds and budgets, you know, to do it. And then also a lot of their content gets stolen. A lot of the great things that they create gets like stolen even, right? So we don't have a perfect system, right? But I think it's important that, so for instance, when something comes out, okay, thank you for Forspoken, let's keep doing better, let's keep getting better. And I think that's also like the problem of where we incorporated DEI conversations in gaming spaces to the detriment of any space, right? Because a lot of folks, you know, in the gaming space are like, oh, you want more diverse games? Okay, we'll just throw a Black woman in there. So you happy now? And, you know, they think that that's the end of the conversation, the story, and that's actually just the beginning, you know? I was like, we've got some other letters in there, right? You know, inclusion and equity and belonging, you know, there are some other things in there. You know, I think DEI is it's a colonial project, if you will. I can talk about that later. But I think that we have to also realize and recognize we're asking for things from a space that they don't see and value our humanity in the first place. So what do? Oh, let's just make your own, create your own studios and do your own. That's not realistic either. But I also think that we have like these alternative pathways. You know, we can divest from certain companies. We can invest in other spaces and places. You know, we can, you know, like, I don't know why, for instance, like a Momo Pixel and her creations, like don't go viral every time she creates and makes something, right? You know, because she's like a Black woman creating. But I also don't spend that much time in that representation space because I have given up on that because it's very frustrating to go and talk to these companies and industries to say, hey, why don't you have more Black and brown people in the room? Why aren't you hiring more? Why aren't you creating more? These people do not care. They don't care. So I shifted my energy and focus like a long time ago to just talk about the people who are in the space. I love spending time with the gamers and the streamers and the people, you know, who are creating their own spaces, which is why I love streaming so much, right? Because here you are in control of like your content with some restrictions, but you're in control of like your story and your narrative. But I think, you know, we stay frustrated because we're never going to get what we want from these spaces. That's not an answer, you know? But I think that we have to, we're going around in circles and loops like with these folks, and we have to just realize that some folks just don't care about our humanity and our voices and our perspectives. That's not an answer, but that's all I got for you right now. That's what I got. Yes, sir.
Well, I guess to that point, can you talk about the way in which Black streamers fill in that gap of representation where, you know, again, I think as an anime watcher, right, we think Piccolo, right? Black people have adopted Piccolo, right? There's no
Cookout with us.
Like there's nothing about him other than Black people deeming him as Black and seeing similarities.
Right.
So in what ways do like Black streamers, either by virtue of them being Black and playing a game, or playing in a particular type of way that exposes the underlying commonalities between the game and Black experiences. To what extent do they help kind of fill in that gap?
Ooh, I'm glad you brought up Piccolo, because I think a lot of times we spent time, you know, co-opting people for our own needs and means and ends. There's a game, Beyond Good and Evil, Jade. Not sure if you all remember Jade. Jade is a very ambiguous character, right? And so she was one of those characters that all the girlies, we all fought over, right? You know, Asian friends was like, no, she Asian. You know, Latinx girls like, no, she Puerto Rican. No, she Dominican. Black girls like, no, she Black. She's just light skinned. Biracial folks was like, no, she's mixed race. Her daddy white, her mama Black. You know, so we created all these dynamic, fantastic stories because we weren't given the diversity. We didn't see ourselves. And so we had to, you know, we were pulling for straws to try to, you know, create those kinds of narratives. But when it comes to like the streaming space, what I love so much about the streaming space, we were talking about this earlier. I think the streaming space put on front and center just all the issues and all the problems of diversity inside gaming culture. I think every other week there's somebody stream, you know, who, you know, somebody, you know, went from the streaming space mad about the hairstyles in the game and they took it to Twitter and then the Twitter thread went viral, right? To say, hey, you're still not doing our hair in the right ways. Or, you know, talking about the colorism, like, you know, or talking about, you know, any number of things. So I really love the streaming space because they basically, they're saying the quiet part out loud for us, right? They're doing a lot of work. There's a lot of emotional labor here and a lot of effective labor, you know, here because they are really carrying the water for the industry. And they keep us in there and they keep us compelled to want to be in those spaces, despite them not showing up for us in the ways that we want them to. You know, we're still committed because we're committed to one another, because anime matters so much to us, because gaming matters so much to us. And then it's like, you know, it's like one of those things that that's always going to let you down. You love it, but it's going to let you down every time. But we're there for different reasons. We're not there for them. We're there for us, you know? And I think that's what the streaming space really is showcasing, because I often get asked the question like, well, Kishonna, if it's so bad, why are you still there? I'm like, I'm there because my people there. You know, what you mean? We don't care about y'all. You know, we care about us, you know? I remember we were talking earlier too about how in my early work, when I was talking about, you know, just how racist and sexist these spaces were, I remember we were talking about how the publishers won't publish certain words. It was hard to like, you know, it was hard for them to like, you know, make sense of like what a titty streamer is or whatever, you know, and all that stuff. Yeah. And I remember the N-word is very prominent in my work and in my book because I'm in Black spaces and Black people are, you know, using like the N-word, you know, in their normal communication, you know, practices with each other. And there was like a publisher that was like, you know, you've got to take that out. I was like, no, I'm not taking that out. And then they also said, you need to clean up this language. I was like, what do you mean clean up the language? You know, there's a lot of cussing, you know, and it was a lot of, you know, AAVE, you know, a lot of Black talk, a lot of Spanglish, you know, a lot of things, you know, from like our speech practices in the space. I'm like, no, I want those things kept intact. And because if I were to do that, then, you know, I'm basically saying the way of, you know, their epistemological knowledge is not valuable. The ways of their thinking and knowing and existing in the world is like devalued. I was like, I'm not going to do that inside these spaces. Because I think that goes also back to that digital identity, like development model that like I'm creating. You know, there's something with the digital that allowed us to create something so different and something so dynamic. And I talk a lot about folks, you know, when people are like, you know, when Twitter finally goes down, like, is Black Twitter going to be gone, right? I'm like, listen, Black Twitter ain't going nowhere. You know what I'm saying? But I think it goes back to even talking about like the Black migration practices, the migration practices of Black folks, you know, that forced movement inside, you know, these digital spaces of being forced to move, you know, from, you know, MySpace to Black Planet, of being forced to move, you know, from, you know, whatever space, you know, like from Facebook then to Twitter. You know, there are like some practices and policies that are in place that really force our movement out of spaces. But really the soul and the essence of Black folks is just still the same. And that won't be taken away. Elon Musk is not going to be taking that away. Because I think it also recognizes that, you know, Black Twitter, similar to Black gaming, you know, that's a community. And he's looking at it like a platform. There's a huge difference, you know, between, you know, platform versus a community, you know, and you can't like destroy, you know, like the essence of like community. We'll just move somewhere else and just be dynamic and fabulous there. Just like with Tumblr, you know, we were dynamic in Tumblr. We're gonna be dynamic wherever we are, you know. So it's just really interesting. I don't know how I got there. My bad. It's something took me there. The spirit moved me in those ways. Yes, yeah.
This might brush up against this question of authenticity and claiming characters and experiences.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in your thoughts about different gaming genres. Like, how do you think a first-person shooter versus a third-person shooter versus an RPG might both represent identity or facilitate people claiming an identity?
I like that question. Y'all remember when Cyberpunk came out? And not the bad stories with Cyberpunk, the good stories. People were really excited about how you could customize like a character to look like you inside Cyberpunk. So customization is really big, you know, for minoritized, marginalized folks in the gaming space, right? Then that beautiful character that you create, you never see them in the game. You never see them. Because, you know, it's that first person like experience. And a lot of folks said, you know, some people said, well, you know, character customization, you know, it doesn't matter. But other folks was like, yeah, it still does, because even in the act of creating was still such a powerful, beautiful like experience, right? Customization is really big for Black folks. They want to be able to see themselves in authentic ways inside the game. For a long time, we had some blackface in there, let's just be honest, right? You know, I'm thinking about like those early days of like customizing characters, you know, it was a singular experience, you know, you just darkened the skin. And so many people were like, he's not Black, he's not Mexican, you know, he's not capturing, you know, who I am, you know? And so that's why I really love like about the NBA 2K space, which I think is why it's such like a Black space, you know, because, you know, you can create the swagger and the essence and the drip and all that, you know, like the dances and stuff. It's a really beautiful dynamic, you know, kind of like experience. I think a lot of people are more focused on the experience that they can create inside that gaming space. You know, if we have the ability to curate and create a space that mirrors what we look like and who we are, that really brings like a lot of joy. You know, I'm really big about joy, you know, people love that. As opposed to like, you know, like the genre of game, I think as long as you can, even with Cyberpunk, you know, even though we couldn't see, you know, I couldn't see that beautiful character, you know, that I created, I still knew that I created it. It still mattered, right? It still mattered. You know, she matters to me. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. Do you have something more to say on that?
I mean, I haven't done anything beyond just anecdotal observation.
Sure.
But
Those matter too.
it seems like the genre, I totally agree with what you're saying about just the power of creation, being able to create and invest in a character, whether that character is ever capable of somebody else or not.
Yeah.
But the question of the game genre occurred to me when you were showing the clips of violence.
Yeah.
Who's committing violence against who, because your perception of that is very different depending on what game you're playing.
Yeah.
And I wonder if the backlash, if any backlash that exists, or it doesn't, but if there's backlash from seeing Black characters committing violence as opposed to these, white, kind of standard wasp. You use the word wasp. But perceive violence differently coming from those two forces.
Yeah.
But I think we also see violence very differently in different game genres.
Yeah.
So I was wondering just how those
Yeah.
intersect. Like if you're playing a first person shooter,
Yeah.
even if you know your character has certain characteristics, everybody else doesn't see that.
Right.
Whereas
Yeah.
if you're playing a different kind of game, other people might see it more.
Yeah.
Or you might have a different relationship to the violence, and that ultimately will affect your perceptions of race and your assumptions about who gets to commit violence,
Sure.
who is supposed to be on the receiving end of it.
Yeah.
How much power do you have as a player, or does the character have that you created?
Yeah.
That was really the root of my question.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I know we're running down on time. I see Deborah's getting up.
Sorry.
The dean is standing up. Shout outs to the dean for being an amazing leader in this space, for bringing the folks together. It was an amazing lineup of conversations. Please, let's give shout outs to the dean. Yeah, this is awesome. Absolutely. Thank y'all for having me. Yeah, absolutely. I know folks gotta go, but I think I didn't think much about that, the question that you had, until folks were up in arms around Adewale and Assassin's Creed. I'm like, really? When did gamers actually care about, like the violence in the game? But it was because of who was doing it. They hadn't seen that level of like violence like before. Yeah. I also think that most gamers in some of these spaces, they mostly don't care. Most folks go in there, and especially in the console space, it's very much like a multiplayer kind of experience. They're connecting with other people. So they'll play. I'm even thinking about, there was a group of folks that were playing genital jousting. Y'all know genital jousting? Oh my gosh, don't look it up. Pull it up, Dan. I should make the Dean pull it up. But it was, and it was so interesting. Really, gamers come together for the experience with one another, really, especially like for Black and brown folks. Like the content, they'll play really some games with trash content and questionable kinds of things, but we'll play it. We'll play it all day, because, we're able to like connect like with friends. I'm thinking about also like with Black and, I had to contend with a lot of Black and brown folks playing Harry Potter, the Harry Potter game too, right?
Actually, I have a question for you about that too.
Yeah.
But that's based on the fact that there was such a community for the books, right?
Right.
Like, it's not just like any little people.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. That success of Harry Potter would not have been a success. That's right. Without that community, that just
Exactly.
I see it this way, right? And so, but how far can we play that in?
Right.
Run up against the fact that it is designed and marketed in a different way.
That's right. That's right. And I think you got thoughts on this?
Other than, I think you're making a good point,
Yeah,
right? That
yeah.
I think, right, with the game itself, being so interwoven with the politics of the person who created it, right? To what extent is that limited the content of the game, the kind of characterization of the game, the importance of the game you're allowed to do? Right, because she herself has very kind of limited and often restricted thinking about what it means to be and express certain social identities, right? So how does that run up against some sort of customization